we Mandela, we Mandela, Tatu Mandela, we long live, we Matiba, we Matiba, we Matiba, we long Tatu Mandela, Nelson Mandela.
As a small child, I stood on the outer edges of the evening campfire. They spoke of hardship and drought, of wars and of poverty. As I listened to them, images of color were conjured up in my mind. As I looked up into the clear, crisp night sky, I saw millions of stars. I wondered how they shone. As the moon moved across the dark sky, it changed color from silver to a bright red as it reached the horizon. It was a beautiful sight.
Like all Xhosa children, I hardly remember any occasion when I was ever alone at home. There were always other children with whom I shared food and blankets at night. After supper, we would listen enthralled to my mother and sometimes my aunt, telling us stories, legends, myths and fables, which have come down from countless generations, and all of which tended to stimulate the imagination and contain some valuable moral lesson.
We say Nelson Mandela is the VIP, not just because the VIP is the buzzword. He's a VIP for really the right reason, deservedly. Nelson Mandela, the VIP, a very important prince, a very important person. A very important philosopher, a very important president, a very important philanthropist, and a very important pensioner. That's a VIP. Uthe wakhasa esequnu, uthe wamangenja esequnu, uthe waqala ukuhamba esequnu, ukukhubuluza kwakhe nakho kubonakalisa esequnu, wakhula ke de wayinkwenkwana.
In our home, there were other dependents, boys mainly, and at an early age I drifted away from my parents and moved about, played and ate together with other boys. I loved stick fighting most of all.
Abe inkokheli evayo, abe inkokheli ecingayo, abe inkokheli eqiqayo, abe inkokheli ethethayo, abe inkokheli ekwaziyo ukuphefumlelana nabantu bakhe. Athi namhlanga athethanga abe ngathi uthethile ngokuthi ndabajonga abantu ancume. Injalo inkokheli.
I must have been about 5 years old when I began going out with other boys to look after sheep and calves, and when I was introduced to the exciting love of the veld. Later, when I was a bit older, I was able to look after cattle as well.
As a young shepherd, I looked after cattle and sheep. There was time to reflect and to enjoy color. I watched in wonder at the sight of the rainbow. I understood little of how a tiny raindrop could reflect such a beautiful range of colors. I experienced the very rich colors of nature through the 4 seasons.
This is Kunu. This is where Nelson Mandela grew up. He came here with 9 years. He started school here, just outside the museum. Here, the sliding stone where he used to play when they were grazing. This is the place where he used to slide here when they were grazing, just to waste time.
As I look back to those days, I am inclined to believe that the type of life I led at my home, my experiences in the veld where we worked and played together in groups, introduced me at an early age to the ideas of collective effort.
This is the class where he started school. This is the very same spot where he got the name Nelson. This is the church, because at that time the school and the church were interlinked. Because at that time we were not supposed to start school if you don't have a Christian name, a Baptist name. You must get a Baptist name, then you go to school. Then he started school without a Baptist name. His class teacher, Mr. Mdingane, asked him, "What is your Christian name?" He said, "I'm Rolihlahla." He said, "Rolihlahla is not a Christian name. It must be an English name." He said, "Today you are Nelson." It's where he got the name Nelson.
A game I enjoyed very much was what I called kweta. We would stop girls of our age group along the way and ask each one to choose the boy she loved. Finally, we used to sing and dance and fully enjoyed the perfect freedom we seemed to have far away from the old people.
Mandela is born in Mvezo and came to settle in Kunu. That's where the father passed away. Then the mother had to take him to his other families that were fortunate and well established at the time. That happened to be here in Mkagezweni.
We must never forget that the institution of traditional leaders is sanctified by African law and custom, by our culture and tradition. I saw chieftaincy not only as the pivot around which community life turned, but as the key to positions of influence, power, and status.
My great-grandfather was very close with Mandela's father. So this was arranged way before he could pass away, that upon my passing away, then my son should come live with you and then you'll raise him up. He grew up with Justice, my grandfather. This is the house that Justice had, which he had to share it with Mandela upon his arrival. So it was then belonging to them both, Justice and Mandela. There was 2 beds here, this side and that other side. And there used to be a shelf there, which in it there was books that they used to read. Mandela got to stay here when he was 9 years of age. He grew up till he got to circumcision school, and he was transformed from being a boy to a man. After that, he introduced to them that they should take wives. That's when they then avoided by running away and going to Johannesburg, because they were against the taking of wives which were not girlfriends of theirs.
Some of you may remember that I left the countryside to retain my bachelorhood. The experience of my young adulthood in the big city was very different. Color was no longer the natural color of the countryside. The color of the city was robust, vibrant, and explosive.
I was being groomed for the position of chieftaincy, but then ran away, you know, from a forced marriage. That changed my whole career. But if I'd stayed at home, I would have been a respected chief today, you know. And I would have had a big stomach, you know, and a lot of cattle and sheep.
Then came the wasted prisoners. A great hood descended over my eyes. Gray became the primary and paramount color. The paint on the interior walls and the gates and the cell doors was gray.
After his release from prison, it must have taken him about a week or two to come visit the area. So he did come, saw my grandmother and some of the community people that he grew up with.
Then came freedom and the lifting of the dark hood from my eyes. It was not merely the miracle of freedom, but it was the miracle which I experienced of a person who had regained the power of sight. I could not get enough of looking at, feeling, touching, and experiencing this new recovery of the experience of culture.
Nobody ever sat with me at regular intervals to give me a clear and connected account of the history of our country, of its geography, natural wealth and problems, of our culture, of how to count, to study weights and measures.
This is my grandmother, Justice's wife. She's a member of this family since Madiba and my grandfather Justice were still youthful. Justice.
Yona nto esindivuyisa kakhulu leyo okubana ihlabathi elilonke libe liphansi kwakhe.
Like all Xhosa children, I acquired knowledge by asking questions to satisfy my curiosity as I grew up, learned through experience, watched adults, and tried to imitate what they did. In this process, an important role is played by custom, ritual, and taboo, and I came to possess a fair amount of information in this regard.
By the time Mandela was listening to the elders here, he was just on the other side of the kraal.
Because Mandela was very inquisitive. That is why he was listening to, asking a lot of questions to the regent king.
They were still very young to attend the elders' meeting. So during that time, boys were not allowed to sit with the elders under these trees. So that is why they were hiding themselves behind the kraal so that they can just listen to what they are saying, but were not forming part of the meeting.
The two influences that dominated my thoughts and actions during those days were chieftaincy and the church. After all, the only heroes I had heard of at that time had almost all been chiefs. Equally important was the position of the church, which I associated not so much with the body and doctrine contained in the Bible, but with the person of Reverend Mattiolo. In this circuit, he was as popular as the regent, and the fact that in spiritual matters he was the regent's superior and leader stressed the enormous power of the church.
Crime is very rife in this place, which was never unheard of. If I can leave that house locked even for a month,
you would be ripped off.
It will be ripped off now because the crime is very rife. What he's still striving for is a better life for everybody in South Africa, from rural areas to urban areas.
And that he got that sort of understanding from growing up here in Mkhakezweni under Chief Jong Ndaba.
Yes, from growing up under Chief Jong Ndaba, and that he was educated under in the missionary schools.
Yes.
And his education was Christian orientated, as he is now also a staunch Christian, even now.
What was even more was that all the progress my people had made, the schools that I attended, the teachers who taught me, the clerks and interpreters in government offices, the agricultural demonstrators and policemen were all the products of missionary schools.
This here was a class for Mandela. This is the class he attended in as a young boy in his junior, I think, school. I'm now inside Nelson Mandela's classroom. It used to be Justice classroom as well, for Justice was 4 years older than Mandela.
An African. I am an African. My language is Zulu. I eat tutu, spinach and sam. Our culture is rich and sweet like a tomato. We celebrate with a song and dance isiqathamiya. The beat of the drum tells us where we come from, the wonderful rich land of Africa.
Upon his coming out of prison, he paid a visit to the community. He went straight to the great place, but he also insisted he be taken to come and see his class. Upon him seeing his class, he then declared that it should be kept as it is. He hired construction to come refurbish it and make it look nice so that it stays as is.
South Africa is a beautiful country, but most people can't see that. Let's hold hands, we'll see that. We are the beautiful flowers. We are the beautiful flowers. Flowers of Africa. Flowers of Africa.
Most men, you know, are influenced by their background. I grew up in a country village until I was 23, when I then left the village for Johannesburg and learnt to absorb Western standards of living and so on. But my opinions were already formed from the countryside, and you'll therefore appreciate my enormous respect for my own culture, indigenous culture. Of course, Western culture is something we cannot live without. So I've got these two strands of cultural influence. But I think it would be unfair to say this is peculiar to me because many of our men are influenced by that.
namhlanje kuthiwe kwaba bahamba naye mabaphakame bamkhahlele enkundleni lomhlanje kwigama ukuze bonke ebomini babo bahambe befundisa.
I traveled through the rich countryside of the Eastern Cape, between different villages and towns, and enjoyed the rich tapestry of color that is so special in that area of South Africa. I return to it whenever I can. Sadly, it is not as often as I would like to return. I am not being allowed to retire because they say I've been loafing for 27 years.
Mandela, when long live, when Martin.